Welcome to Conversations with the Community Leader, brought to you by the Leadership Kitsap Foundation. I'm your host and Leadership Kitsap alum, Dave Walters. With me today is Jill Stanton, Executive Director of the Bremerton Housing Authority. Jill, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So the Bremerton Housing Authority has been with us since 1940, and it originally started in Kitsap County to alleviate the housing crisis with all the workers for supporting the war effort.
Exactly.
So a very long history in Kitsap County. So we have lots to talk about, Jill, but before we get to that, let's talk about you.
Okay.
Where are you originally from?
So I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and I spent my early childhood in the Midwest, mostly in Iowa. From there, my parents moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and we lived in kind of Tennessee and other southern states for most of my older childhood. And then when I was 18, I moved to Seattle, and I've been here ever since.
Okay, in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
So you call yourself a native Washingtonian then?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, sort of?
Yeah, I had my 3 kids here, and they
okay,
will
so you
never
don't consider
leave.
yourself a transplant. Okay,
No,
great.
No.
What was your educational background?
So I have a bachelor's degree in accounting from Seattle City University. That one took me a while to get, and then after that I went on to get a master's degree in organizational leadership from Gonzaga.
Oh, okay, so leadership's right along your alley.
Absolutely.
All right, so what was your first job then?
So my first,
not your first
yeah,
job.
Okay, we're going to go back there.
We don't
Okay,
we don't have to start there.
So career path-wise, I started in tax and audit for a very small accounting firm, but I quickly left that probably after 3 years and started working for a housing authority. So I started working for Everett Housing Authority as their accountant and worked my way up to finance director and then became deputy executive director there before moving on to King County Housing Authority, where I was just previous to coming here.
And then how long have you been with Bremerton?
I've been with Bremerton Housing Authority for just over 3 years.
3 years,
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, so pretty much your adult career has all been in a housing authority.
It has, and it wasn't something that I aspired to or even knew what a housing authority was growing up, but it actually has been a very fulfilling life work for me, so yeah.
And then did you always want to be the executive director once you got into the housing authority world?
No. So I think leadership comes pretty naturally to me, just given that I come from a family of leaders. And so leadership definitely, but I was very comfortable being deputy executive director. So second in charge, I think it was comfortable. I wasn't the person at the top, but I felt like I had a lot of influence over both of the agencies that I worked for. But this opportunity came up and it seemed like a really good fit at the particular time for my skill set. So yeah, I decided I do like it. I think you feel a lot of responsibility as the executive director, and sometimes that's tough, but I have I have a lot of ideas and I have a lot of vision. And so to be able to be the executive director and actually be able to carry that out in ways that I wasn't able to in my previous 2 jobs or roles, has been really fulfilling and good for me. And I hope good for the community and good for the people we serve.
So why Kitsap County?
Yeah, so the questions that you sent me earlier, it said, why did you choose Kitsap County? And I thought, I'm not sure that I chose Kitsap County. I think Kitsap County might have chose me. And so, because I wasn't sure even in, I was studying the housing authority. I definitely wanted to stay with the housing authority and I was looking to make a move. And when I went through the interview process, and the board shared some of the particular challenges of Bremerton Housing Authority, I thought, I have a unique skill set, and it won't fit every housing authority, but it will fit this one quite well. And so, it was a mutual choice, I think.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah.
So I do have to do a cheap plug here for Leadership Kitsap, because you are an alum
I am.
of Leadership Kitsap. And then how did you enjoy that program?
So I enjoyed it. they let me in kind of at the last minute. So I actually wasn't planning to do it until maybe this year. But actually, Katie Walters said, "Hey, you're in. If you want in, you're in." And my good friend Tony Ives was going to go through it, and I thought, I want to do this with another leader that I work closely with,
Oh,
and so
oh, that's kind of a shared
a
experience. And
shared experience. And so we did it together, and that was great. It really bonded us. And I think both his agency and Bremerton Housing Authority, we have a lot of shared vision and things that we're trying to achieve. So going through Leadership Kitsap with him was really why I chose to do it at the time that I did it.
and what is his organization?
It's a Kitsap Community
It is
Resources.
KCR. Okay.
KCR.
All right. So what really are the primary services of the Bremerton Housing Authority?
So our primary services are housing. So we have high quality, stable housing for people with limited incomes. But we also provide other services that go along with housing. And part of our mission is to help people become economically self-sufficient, and also to strengthen our community. So I think it's really important when you think about the housing authority that yes, we are housing, but we're housing people, and those people are part of our community. And so how we do this work really matters. And the last sentence in our mission says that we'll use our private and public resources efficiently and effectively. And that's really important because when we are federally funded, and when we don't use our resources to their fullest extent, we lose money in our community. And that money goes somewhere. And when we have the high needs that Kitsap has, it's really important to keep focused that this is part of our mission. We need to use everything that we have in the most efficient way possible. And that's how we will impact and affect people's lives for the better and our community.
So so the housing. Does BHA own housing?
Yes. So
Do you rent housing? How does that?
we own housing, so we own about 600 units, and some of it is called public housing, which people are pretty familiar with.
Mhm.
But then we also have housing that is funded through the voucher program, and it's called project-based vouchers. So that's the subsidy that goes in to pay the rental assistance for the people that live in those units. Our biggest program, though, is actually our voucher program. So we have about 1,900 vouchers, and people can use those in our properties, but they more use them in the community, so in private landlords. So they can take the
Oh,
voucher and then they pay 30% of their income for their rent, and then the housing authority kicks in the rest. And that's, yeah, as I said, our biggest program.
okay. And you are not a government agency?
We're called a local government
Okay, a local
agency.
government agency.
We are our city's housing authority, but we are not a part of the city. The mayor does appoint our board, but we have nothing to do with, like, we're not part of their budget. We are our own entity.
And you have your own
essentially.
board.
We have our own board, yes.
Okay, interesting. How many employees do you have?
So we have just over 100 employees. We're a unique housing authority. We're small, or we're considered a small housing authority, but we have two parts to our business, which is a little bit unusual. So we have the very typical public housing voucher programs on one side, and that employs about 40% of our staff. But we also work for the multifamily side of HUD. So there's only 12 housing authorities in the nation that do that work, and Bremerton is one of them. With that work, we are actually administering rental assistance through multifamily housing for people that live in this housing in 4 different states, including Washington, Nebraska, Utah, and just recently we got the Missouri contract. So that's why, as you were saying
Wow.
earlier, we have a large budget. So even though we're a small housing authority, our budget is huge, but it's because we're doing all of this work on the multifamily side of HUD. And
So
we
so
employ.
what actually is multifamily?
So multifamily, it's how would I describe it? So there's public housing, which is funded under one
Yep.
part of the law. Multifamily is kind of the same thing, but funded under a different part of the federal law.
Okay.
And so, but they essentially work very similar. So it's just that they're funded through different sources.
So the client base is the same.
The client base is very much the same.
Okay.
Yes.
And you oversee that in other states as well?
We do. So,
Wow.
so kind of in the same way where HUD will give us money to administer our programs locally, HUD gives us money to actually pay the rental assistance to the landlords that are on the multifamily program. And we do, yeah, it's a lot. But
Wow.
all of those employees now, or primarily all of those employees, work from home. So they, even though before COVID they were all coming into the office, their work was always kind of virtual
Was always
because
remote.
it was always remote. Yeah. So now they all work from home. So.
Okay. And then, so you said beyond just housing. So what do you mean by beyond housing? What does that look like?
So, and maybe beyond housing isn't the best description, but I think what I would say is incorporating all of housing.
Okay.
So typically housing authorities have really stayed in their lane, meaning we do subsidized housing. It's independent living. It's, so you're you're able to live in our housing, but you have to be able to live independently. So we're not providing a lot of services. Over the years, that has really shifted because we're finding that the people that are living in our housing are more successful when they have other things that they need to live, healthy lives. And in addition, so what I'm talking about is healthcare services, support services, even for our voucher holders, housing navigation services. So being able to find a home to live in can be really challenging. And in fact, people might be surprised to know that you can get a voucher. So you can get on our wait list, get a voucher, and go start looking for your home. Our success rate is only 30% under that scenario. So virtually 30% of our voucher holders, and we call them shoppers by the time they get their voucher, are able to actually succeed in using their voucher. And that's because they have other barriers that make it very tough for them to be successful in housing. So we're trying to step up to the plate now and actually help with those other barriers so that our success rate when you have a voucher goes up. So we could talk more about how we're doing that.
So it sounds like there's a lot of partnering then.
There's partnering is actually, so we have a strategy. It's a 4-part strategy. Partnering is number 2 on that because we are way more successful when we partner with other agencies. So we recently started what we call a partner referral program. So the one way to get a voucher is to get on our wait list, but our wait list is only open for about a week every year, sometimes every other year. And then you just essentially have to wait for your name to come up. The other way to get a voucher is to be receiving services through one of our local partner agencies. And I'll use the example of like the Salvation Army. So if you're receiving services staying at the Salvation Army and the Salvation Army has said, this person is able, they're stable, they're able to live independently, but they just don't have the financial means to do that. They can actually refer that person into the housing authority and we will give them a voucher. And the agency, the partnering agency, will then help them. They have agreed with that to us that they will help them find a home and continue receiving services. We do this with many, many agencies. It started with the YWCA, and now it has expanded to probably 15 other agencies. The first couple months of this program, we got 150 referrals, and so those are all processing. We're processing those now. But essentially, people that have come in the past through these types of programs have between a 70 and 100% chance of getting housed and staying housed versus the 30% from our wait list.
Wow, drastic improvement.
It's a drastic improvement, and but it's controversial because people on the wait list are like, wait a minute, is somebody taking my place now? And so we had to do it with a lot of intention, and we had to do it with the support of the community because we want to be fair.
Oh, yeah.
So we still continue to pull from our wait list, and we tell people, hey, you should engage in services because 1, you may be able to get a voucher faster, but 2, you may be way more successful in in getting housed if you're getting other services to, overcome some of the barriers that life has dealt you. So,
And then, how many clients do you have, or shoppers? How many total people are you serving?
so right now we serve about 1,500 people through the or households
Households.
through the voucher program. Um, as I said earlier, we have about 600 units of housing, so other households living in our housing. Um, we also administer the vouchers for their Housing Kitsap program, and they have about 400 vouchers. And then through the multifamily side, the numbers can get really large. So we have about 24,000 families that we're providing rental assistance for.
Yeah, but here in Kitsap County, you're well over 2,000 households.
Definitely, yes.
Wow, that's an impact.
It's a lot.
So,
yeah.
What are some of the causes of our housing shortage?
Well,
The people always get people get confused or miss because we're not in the know. So, what are the experts say really are some of our causes?
Kitsap is very unique. So we're right across from Seattle, high-paying jobs in Seattle. People can get to Seattle very quickly. I mean, I know there's a lot of complaining about the ferries right now, but we also have Kitsap Transit. So you can pretty easily live in Kitsap and work in Seattle. And if you're making the Seattle wages, you can afford to live in a pretty nice place over here in Kitsap, or just any place in Kitsap, right? So the need for housing here is huge, because we're not just housing people that live and work in Kitsap. We're also housing people that work in Seattle. And so that's one of the issues. Of course, we also have the Navy here. Every time a ship comes in, it brings people in. And we love those people. And it makes it even more challenging for people that have a voucher or are low income and needing housing. So that's just my opinion. I think a lot of people share that, but that's kind of one of the unique challenges of this area. We're also the second most expensive county to live in, and one of the challenges early on when I came here was that the voucher, we call it the voucher payment standard. So that's how much you can essentially pay for rent. HUD limits that, and that payment standard is calculated by what's called the fair market rent. And for Kitsap, our fair market rent here was far below what it would cost to actually pay rent in this area. So that made it even more challenging. We quickly identified that as a problem that we had to solve. And so we were able to challenge that calculation. And the way that worked is that HUD, if you go through the steps to challenge the fair market rent in your jurisdiction, and it turns out that you have proved that it is too low, HUD can't say, oh no, we're not going to accept that. They have to accept that. That's the law.
Oh, okay.
So it was a harrowing experience, because we had to send out a lot of surveys and get responses to those surveys, and you had to have a certain amount of survey respondents.
For it.
Yeah, so it was stressful, but we got through it, and it showed that our fair market rents were about 20% lower than what people could actually rent for. And so once we got those adjusted, it quadrupled the amount of housing available for our voucher holders. So it had a significant impact. It also had an impact of allowing, because there's a lot of landlords that want to be on our program, but they had to keep their rents at this
at that lower.
yes, and so then they were able to actually raise their rents, which was significant. At one point, one of the landlords came and said, hey, we've decided we want to take up an offering to help you pay for that study. And I said, no, that one's on HUD. I said, but you could see the impact that it meant to our private landlords and to that market. And so when it comes to our mission of strengthening our community, it's through things like that, being aware of the federal resources that are available to us and ensuring that we bring them back here.
What are some of your biggest challenges that you guys are facing?
So for the Housing Authority, I would say our number one challenge is finding capital dollars to actually develop or buy housing. Okay. On a larger scale, I would say that we're part of this community, and I think the housing continuum starts with people who don't have homes. And it's our board, myself, it's a mission for us. It's a vision for us to not have people living without homes. And so, as I was stating earlier, typically we do subsidized housing, so people ready to live independently. But we're no longer comfortable just staying in that lane. So now we are saying we need to be a part of solving this, because eventually our hope is that those people are going to live in our housing or are going to have a voucher, and then we'll move out of that into being self-sustainable, economically independent. But it starts with where they're at now, so we have to start with where they are at now, and it's become a major focus, and that's probably the number one challenge that our agency is facing with our partners, St. Vincent de Paul, KCR, Kitsap Mental Health Services, Peninsula Community Health Services, all of these, and that's just to name a few. I mean, there's so many more that are all working on this with our city and with our county, because it's a community thing that we have to deal with, and we can only deal with it effectively by working together. So I would say that's the number one challenge.
Okay. Where does your funding come from?
The funding for our vouchers and our public housing come from HUD. So
Straight from HUD.
Straight from HUD, yes. We also get some funding for capital development through like the tax credit program, the low-income housing tax credit program. We apply for grants through Commerce mainly. And most of that is just to acquire or develop housing. We also, in this county, have the county investment in affordable housing dollars, which is the 1/10 of 1% sales tax, so that every year they come out with grant money. We apply for some of that. That essentially is what funded the major portion for our new project, the Evergreen Bright Start. That was the leverage funding that we needed to get state dollars. But most of, or essentially all of our operating money comes from the federal government. We have some small portion of rental assistance that comes through our city. And then we also use the money. So as I told you, the multifamily side, that part of our agency is run like a business. And so we do make a small amount of profit on that we subsidize our other programs with.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So how can the community get involved?
So, yeah, the community is very, very important. So, I guess what I would say to that question, I've always been personally, if I see a problem and I think that I have some ability to help solve it, maybe not to solve it to completely, but I can help. I have something that I can offer. We all do. I offer it. I can't. I'm compelled to move forward and solve problems that I feel like I can solve. And I think we all have that. And so, one of my favorite things to say is, we are serving human beings. Most of us, if not all of us, can't walk down the street and see somebody suffering and not feel something. If you feel that empathy, I would say, and you are in a community, which we all are, you should take that as a responsibility, as a call to action to get involved. And if we all did that on a regular basis, I think we would solve some of the human suffering happening all around us. There's a person that I met recently who I think about this. Her name's Bree Medley. She's an architect. She works in Seattle, but she lives in Kitsap. And she kind of got involved in the whole shelter issues that we have been experiencing, and she had very strong feelings about what type of shelter and where a shelter should go, and she made those feelings very well known at the city council meeting. And when the city council decided that they wanted a hybrid shelter, she didn't just walk away. She was like, you know what? I think I can help with this. And so this person who is not in a nonprofit, this was not her life before, she stepped up and she started serving on the development team. she was responsible for getting zoning code changes done to actually allow the hybrid shelter that the city council voted on, and we had no idea wasn't even allowed anywhere in the city. And so she took that on. She continues to serve with us. She meets with us every week. And it's things like that, she brought her skill set and she effectively made a difference. And so that's what I would say. That's what the community can do. Anybody can do it. It's not that hard. It's just do it.
That's outstanding. So what's next for BHA? What's coming up on your horizons?
So we just opened Evergreen Bright Start, which is our housing for young adults. There's a lot. I'll talk about the project that I'm really excited about right now.
Yes.
So we are partnering with the Bremerton School District to house families who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness that have children attending school in the Bremerton School District. So it came to our attention maybe a couple of years ago that there's approximately 100 to 250 children in school that are living in homelessness or risk of homelessness. And we want to solve that. That's not okay. Like, where do you do homework if you don't have a home? So we set out to find appropriate housing. We just last week signed a purchase and sale agreement. Lots of creative funding and ideas, community partners, including credit unions that have never worked with the Housing Authority before, all coming together to say, homeless children is not okay. We have to do this. So it's a 25 unit complex. 23 of the units will be used to house these families. And I always think about taking a bite out of crime. We're taking a bite out of what I consider a crime. And so it's only 23 homes, but some of the numbers are families. So we think this will have a significant impact, and that it'll be a model that we can roll out all across Kitsap.
Wow.
That's our hope.
That's super exciting. Super exciting. I want to talk a little bit about leadership. I know you've talked a lot about collaboration with other people. How do you develop your staff?
So, organizational leadership is what I got my master's degree in. So organizational health is really important to me. I guess the way I'd answer that question is to say I try to listen to the staff first and try to pair resources with what they need and with what they bring to our agency so that they can achieve their highest potential. And I think creating a culture where people feel safe, where we embrace diversity, where we have a shared vision is what really helps people understand what they can bring and motivates them to bring to solving these challenges and to carrying out the mission of the Housing Authority. So there's probably a lot more to that than that, but that's kind of the basics.
Oh my gosh, our half an hour is actually up.
I'm not surprised.
I think we could be here 4 times this long, but I'd like to thank you for all the Bremerton Housing Authority does and what you specifically do for our community. Major impact and continuing to do great things. So please visit bremertonhousing.org and of course leadershipkitsap.org for information about both of these exciting organizations. And I look forward to seeing you again next time on Conversations with the Community Leader.